Hi everyone, my name is Olivia James. I'm a Harley Street practitioner and I specialize in public speaking anxiety. I'm talking today to my colleague and Harley Street neighbor, Christopher Paul Jones, the breakthrough expert. And
Hi there.
we're going to be talking about our professional approach to helping clients manage their anxiety. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about what your professional view is on anxiety and how you go about helping clients manage their anxiety?
Right, well, anxiety is basically when your response to danger has been overclocked. So when you start linking fear or anger or stress to situations that don't require it. Because obviously, fight, flight, or freeze, this survival response we have from primitive days, is incredibly useful for running from a saber-toothed tiger or fighting a saber-toothed tiger or rolling over and playing dead. It's not so useful when we have too many emails or when we're scared of standing on stage talking to people or other things that aren't actually particularly dangerous, but our brain is still acting as if they are. And then we're going into these adrenaline rushes. So, I mean, the first thing is to realize, to acknowledge it. So it's not about fighting it. It's not about trying to push it away. And that's what a lot of people do. They try and fight their anxiety, or more often they'll say, oh, I'm trying to client email me. They'll say, I've been trying to control it, but it hasn't worked. And of course, the more you try and control what is an emotion, the more you try and do something mentally for what is physical, the more stuck you become. So it's like a fear of being unsafe. And then and then when you realize you can't control it, you feel more unsafe, and it becomes a spiral. And the analogy I often use, it's a bit like having a screaming child that you lock in the cupboard. You try ignoring it or pushing it away to stop it from crying, but of course, once you lock in the cupboard, the child will cry, scream more. And it's a bit like that with your anxiety. So the first step is to acknowledge it. And then it's really about building up safety, teaching the subconscious mind that this overclocked mechanism that normally learned from the past, normally a time of overwhelm, or you felt you didn't have any support. Whether that was true or not, that's what you felt consciously. So it's really about teaching the subconscious mind there's other ways to feel safe other than running this old pattern, basically. So that's where I would go with it.
That makes a lot of sense. And so can you tell us some of the results you've had and some of the types of anxiety that you've helped clients with? I know you specialize in flying phobia. That seems to be...
I do a lot of, so I do a lot of work with flying. Now, again, flying can be many different phobias, from a fear of heights to a fear of being confined to a fear of loss of control. And so very often when people say, oh, I have a fear of what if, which is a fear of the future. What if, but what if I freak out? What if I panic on the plane? What if everyone looks at me? What if I embarrass myself? All the what ifs are basically future based, and they're often when it's a control issue and therefore an anxiety issue. And unlike a straightforward phobia, when it's anxiety based, as I say, a straightforward phobia can be you had a turbulent flight when you were younger, something like that, and it triggers that response. Anxiety is more just you felt out of control. So yeah, I do work with flying. I do work with all sorts, really, general anxiety, social anxiety. I mean, when people have agoraphobia, i.e. they won't leave their house, that's when their fear of the fear has become so strong that they won't do anything. They're like, their comfort zone has got smaller and smaller, and they're so scared of having a panic attack that they've almost locked themselves off. So the only safe space they have is their home. And again, it's because they've got into this vicious cycle. So I do quite all sorts, really.
So presumably, even then, for some of those people with severe agoraphobia, even in their own home, they don't feel quite safe.
No. Again, it's all about it's not what's true. It's the illusion of what's true. So people they're still having panic attacks in their own home. They're still freaking out, but they're scared that they'll freak out elsewhere. But and that's the other thing. Coming back to treating it, one of the things that people do is they're often, as I say, scared of the fear. And the more you're fearful of fear, the more you create fear. So if you go, maybe I'll panic, maybe I won't. subconsciously, but also consciously. Then you're less likely to panic if you go, what if I panic? What if I panic? See, I can feel it. Now I'm panicking. And it becomes this spiral again. And so what people don't realize is that, you know, anxiety is not a cold. You don't catch fear. You have to be doing something with your feelings, what you're saying to yourself, what you're picturing in your mind. So there's a recipe to feel good and a recipe to feel bad. And when you can tap into that and realize that you're not in control logically, but you are creating it, then you've got a solution there, basically.
Wow, that's really interesting. I've never heard anybody use that like the analogy of a recipe. But that's,
yes.
That must be very, once the person has the recipe, they've come to see you, presumably you
yes.
them, and then they feel that they have a recipe.
Yeah. Well, if you think of it this way, their what if, well, what if this happened, what if that happened, is basically they've just created a movie in their mind of a future event, the worst case scenario. They've basically created a horror movie. So they've imagined themselves on the plane being anxious. They've made a picture of them gripping the seat, sweating. They've said to themselves, oh, I'm going to make a fool of themselves, which is their tune. Their internal music is them talking to themselves. You know, all these things are going on internally, and they've got tension in their stomach and they're breathing a certain way. And of course, if they were imagining themselves sat back, relaxed, breathing deeply, and playing a tune in their head of, I don't know, Benny Hill music or circus music, they're going to feel very different. They're going to make themselves laugh. And so just even those little tips are going to make a difference. And you know, people often say to me, do I believe in positive thinking? And I'm like, well, as opposed from negative thinking, you mean? And the answer is, I don't believe in positive thinking like it's often done of, yeah, you just think happy thoughts, because that's, again, that's kind of pushing things away. But when you think of the future, if you're imagining worst case scenario, your brain doesn't know the difference between what you imagine and what you really feel. So it's going to create those emotions. So whatever you're putting in your mind, and it's not just what you're picturing, what you're saying, what you're thinking, how you're breathing, it's all going to create that future event. And the analogy I would use, it's a bit like, do you see re-edits on YouTube? Have you ever seen re-edits? So this is where people take a movie, like a trailer for like Mary Poppins, and they recut it as a horror movie.
Right.
So there's one I often use in my seminars where they recut It, and it was the 90s It. You remember It? Yeah, the scary clown. And they have him they have all the pictures of him smiling, and then they add in this kind of like family-friendly tune, and it looks like a kind of feel-good movie. And so just by changing how you see those images, what tune you play, it completely changes the feeling of a movie, and that's what we can do to ourselves. But and that's good for the now, and that's good for the future. But as I say, there will be reasons in the past that have caused that. Now, my issue is the wrong word. Traditional counseling often talks about trying to understand it. And as I say, that's only one element. It doesn't deal with the emotions.
That's the rational, because a lot of it's not rational, is it?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Well, emotions aren't logical. No. And if I want you to watch a couple arguing, watching a husband and wife having a fight, a discussion, a frank exchange of ideas, politicians would call it. And one of them is trying to use logic, and one of them is functioning on emotion. The one using logic just turns around and goes, look, you're just being irrational now. Does that ever calm the emotional person down? In fact, it does. In fact, it ends in divorce, So it's like realizing that trying to talk logically to an emotion is, one, a waste of time, and two, actually can cause more stress. So but the thing I would say about intervention therapies, and I include sort of some of the schools of things I do, but hypnotherapy, those kind of things, is a lot of them don't know the difference between, they don't know about dealing with what you call the secondary gain, which is the benefit for the problem, which is the idea that everything we do is meeting a need. So anxiety is trying to keep you safe, trying to keep you protected, some level like that. That's an incredibly useful skill. It's just wrongly learned. And sometimes if a hypnotherapist goes in and goes, bang, 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 I'm going to take out your anxiety, the subconscious mind is going, how will I be safe? And so first you need to build up safety before you then teach other resources. Well, at least that's what I found in my work anyway. I don't know what your experience of those kind of things are.
my training to do with trauma. That's the way
Yeah.
to tackle trauma as well, from a place of safety.
Yes.
And it needs to be gradual and manageable, because the whole thing about trauma is that it's overwhelming. So if even
Yes.
as a therapeutic approach, if you go too fast, the person doesn't feel safe, it's going to be re-traumatizing, and you could probably do more harm than good, actually.
Yes.
So I totally agree with you on that. I think you and I sort of pretty much sing from the same sort of hymn sheet when it comes to like tackling. I think tackling
Yes.
anxiety are very similar. So yeah, so because do you want to just explain to people who don't really understand about secondary gains? So I understand that there is the reason people want to feel safe. Can you give an example of like a secondary gain, like a practical example?
Well, secondary gain can be anything from, well, here's an analogy. So I had a client who had a fear of flying, and we'd worked on all the issues. We'd worked on the stuff from the past, worked on his fearful movie of the future. We'd given him resources to get out the emotions. So he kept coming back and saying, look, I don't have any fear of flying, but there's still something in me that won't get me on the plane. I'm like, well, if there's something in you, then clearly there's still something there. And then finally we found it anyway. And basically what he said was, oh, just something's just come to mind. He goes, my wife says, when you get rid of your fear of flying, we can see the world, we can spend 3 or 4 months traveling the world, and then after, we can settle down and have kids. And in that moment, his brain went, I'm not ready for kids.
Right.
So the benefit for holding on to the fear was, I don't have to I don't have to turn to my wife and go, I'm not ready to have kids. Now, again, and this isn't logic. Some people obviously do that logically, but the subconscious is making a lot of decisions. So it just goes, this is the quickest way to stop me having any kids and to stop me having any arguments about it. Bang. So that would be an example of secondary gain. Yeah, I mean, there was a person I knew who was ill all the time, who I worked with, and she was sick all the time. And we're not talking hypochondria in the sense that making up like proper operations and but unnecessarily ill. And we did some sort of, whatever you call it, deep trance work. And it turned out that the only time she ever felt her parents were there for her was when she was sick, So I only get love when I'm ill. So all sorts of these things can go into the subconscious. Now, as I said, with anxiety, with fear, it may be as simple as I don't know how to stay safe. So I've overclocked my alertness, for want of a better word, my radar for danger, because I don't feel safe. So it's super clocked. So in that respect, the secondary gain is to feel safe or to feel protected. Now, sometimes people can have several of these things holding up the issue. And in everything we do, there's always a benefit. And, it's always controversial when I taught courses and said, it's a quote from neurolinguistics, which is, all behavior has a positive intent. And you'd always get the people go, what about murderers?
Yeah.
And go, well, it has a positive intention for the murderer. In their very messed up, really low level way, it's the only way they know how to feel powerful, significant. Whatever it is, it's meeting a need. It might not be beneficial to the world around them. It might not even be beneficial to them, but it's still meeting a need. But of course, the murderer, I'm not going to sit and work with them. But in other cases, it's not about necessarily taking that away. It's about going, how else could you feel safe without having anxiety? I mean, normally the very thing you're trying to achieve is the very thing that's costing you when it comes to things that hold you back. So if you're saying, you get to, I'm trying to stay safe, protected. Okay, well, how safe and protected are you when you're having a panic attack? Oh, well, I'm not. And so very often, there's better ways to meet that positive intention. So that's where I would go with that. And again, so go ahead.
That's really amazing. It's like, I think that's the thing that I love about my work, and you love too, I think, is the detective work. Literally, it's like being a detective, finding out exactly where your person, this is where it comes from. It's that the fear, like not wanting to have kids and not wanting to have that conversation. And this is
Yeah.
like, it's so, so, and very often, that you know, takes a lot of skill, doesn't it, and a lot of experience, but
Yeah.
it's so rewarding when you find the thing and you're able to
Yeah.
help the person. It's just like such a buzz, isn't it? I find.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, and it's sometimes, I think the analogy often for beliefs is like legs of a table. There's a few legs holding it up, and a bit like Jenga. When you've disconnected from enough of those beliefs, their whole limiting belief that's held them back from living their life will just crumble and change. So it is incredibly rewarding. But yeah, the mind is a weird place, and when it comes to the subconscious, and people might not know that term, or unconscious, or whatever you call it, gut brain, body brain, whatever you call it, the part of you that you're not conscious of, the part that governs all your emotions. The important thing to realize is it does have a way of making decisions. It does have a way of thinking, but it's not the same as our analytical, logical mind. So while it is irrational, it's irrational according to its way of making decisions. But our society is taught to teach us to analyze and make sense. You know, like we do maths and we do English and we study at university, and A equals B. Our subconscious doesn't work like that. And going back to second again, it's going, this is the fastest way I know how to stay safe. This is the fastest way I know how to do this. And it just makes a decision like that, and it's running the show from then on in. And a lot of people don't know what's caused their issues. But there's very few fears, very few things we're born with.
Yes.
There are some exceptions to that, but most things we're not born with. So, you know, happiness, relaxation, calmness is not something we have to attain. When we clear away the limitations, we already have it, really. It's more about just peeling away the layers, and certainly with the sort of eye movement you and I both do, you know, that kind of intervention work, that's one way of peeling away the layers. And there's a few different techniques like that for sort of just scrambling through those old beliefs. And it's amazing when people can have a belief that's like they're 100% sure of, and then after a few minutes, it's suddenly like, oh, it's gone. I don't know why I ever thought that way. Or maybe I didn't think that way. And those are the best, you know. How strong is the emotion right now? It's a 10. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a 0. Well, yeah, but maybe. And it's like, yeah, but
they go,
you had it 10 minutes ago.
They say, well, I can't really think about it right now. You know.
Yeah, but you could 10 minutes ago, and I always go, but you could 5 minutes ago, yes? And they go, and then you could see them stop and go, oh yeah, oh, wow. But, and the other people are when they can't find it, they've spent 20 years trying to get rid of this fear.
Yes.
And you see someone go trans-derivation on every quadrant of their brain trying to find the emotion that they used to have. And so they're going, oh, it's gone. And they're frowning, and I'm going, it's a good thing, right? Yeah. But it's weird, and it's just that they spend the next hour trying to find it again. These things are fascinating, and it is important to realize that we change like that. And again, to use the analogy I often use is the dog phobia analogy. You can love dogs. One day you get mauled by a dog, in a second you link fear, danger to a dog. So if the brain can learn to go from pleasure to pain so quickly, it can also learn to go from pain to pleasure. It's just finding the triggers and finding those pathways and changing it, basically.
Yes, absolutely. And finding the right person to help you do that. Like.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So.
And that is the key.
That's the key. I mean, so it's been like really interesting talking to you. I'd love to do another one of these sometime. So
sure, let's do it.
Tell us where people can find out more about you, and if they want to book a session, how can they get hold of you?
Well, if you go to my website, christopherpauljones.com, that has a lot of articles and information. It has my videos on there, although you can also type my name into YouTube, you'll find my tips. And there's an option there for a free consultation, as well as some various little products. So christopherpauljones.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. All right. Speak soon.
You're welcome.
Okay, bye.
Speak soon. Bye.